Peacock Feathers by Temple Bailey. Chapter 10. 1. Mimi and I ate breakfast the next morning under the amazed eyes of Dora Hayes. In a sort of daze of admiration, she set on the table the hot rolls which her mother had sent over, the ham and the fried eggs, a great bowl of fresh cherries. She had never, I'm sure, seen any one like Mimi, slim and white in short skirt and sweater, her hair an oriflamme in the morning sun. Dora's youth was scrawny and freckled and tow-headed and boldly dressed. Yet I am convinced she felt no jealousy of Mimi. She gloated over her rather as a child gloats over some newly discovered treasure. Mimi played her part as mistress of the house pleasantly. She asked if she might have an egg boiled instead of fried, and she ate cherries while she waited. "The cherries are from our own orchard," I told her. Her eyes met mine coldly. "Are they?" "Yes, I picked them. I've been out looking over the place." I tried to speak easily. "It isn't so bad." Hot color flamed up into her cheeks, but she said nothing. And presently Dora came back with the egg, and Mimi asked her a question or two, whether her mother had really risen so early to bake the bread, and the name of the collie who stood waving his plumed tail outside of the screen door. "The collie," Dora said, "has missed and mourned my uncle. Mr. Chandler had been traveling before he died, you know, and he didn't live long after he came back here. Mother and I nursed him, and Jason never left him. He goes up the mountain every day and sits a long time by Mr. Chandler's grave, and then he seems to be satisfied. And he always stays in this house. We can't get him to come to us. We don't try any more." "Let him, Jerry," Mimi said, and I rose and unlatched the screen. The big dog, with a flash of his eye for me, went straight up to Mimi and stood by her side, his ears cocked. He seemed to be waiting for her to make the first move in the affair of their friendship. "Jason?" said Mimi. "I wonder why." "Perhaps because of his golden fleece," I ventured. The big dog still waited. "Jason?" Mimi said again, and this time it was an interrogation. "How much are you going to love me?" He gave a quick bark, as if he understood and answered. It was his pledge of loyalty. He dropped down on the floor by her chair, laid his head on his paws, his bright eyes seeming to weigh us as he watched. Jason, from that day, was Mimi's dog. In a way he was never mine, although he gave me an unwavering devotion. He became her guardian, the companion of her walks, her protector. There were times when I envied him the hours he spent with her, and from which I was shut out. He followed us this morning when breakfast was finished, and we went out on the porch. I had said, "Come and look at our farm, Mimi," and she had hesitated, but Dora's eyes were upon us. She was clearing the table with much clattering of dishes. "You'd better put on your hat, Mrs. Chandler," she volunteered. "You'll get all freckled." Mimi shook her head. "I love the sun." Our house stood on the side of the mountain, with the ranch lands on the broad lower level, which might, in prehistoric times, have formed the bed of some great river. The barns were red painted like the house. The chickens and ducks gave the kaleidoscope effect of many colors at this distance. The pigeons snow-dotted the roofs. There were cows in this pasture, and men and horses in the wide meadows. Towards the west were the cherry orchards, their round-topped trees like great bouquets. Beyond the orchards, a neighboring mountain rose silver-crested against a sapphire sky. I wanted to say, "God made it," as my father had so often said when we worshipped beauty. But I lacked the courage to speak my thoughts to Mimi. I had my first sharp sense of a point of divergence in our ideals. What I said was, "Mimi, doesn't all this make up a bit for the house?" She did not look at me. "Cherry, nothing can make up. I'm not fitted for this life. I don't know where to begin." Something seemed to die in me. Through the darkness which had fallen upon me, I tried to grope my way back to the words of that radiant ceremony. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, for poorer. Mimi had never meant them. She had said she could not be poor, and I, knowing how she felt, had urged her to perjure herself with a promise. Well, I wouldn't hold her to it. I spoke with an effort. "I have no right to ask you to stay, Mimi." She turned on me her startled glance. "What do you mean?" "I thought it all over last night. The best thing we can do is to go back to St. Louis." "But we can't go back." "Why not? Do you think I could face them?" "No." "We'll stick it out somehow. I couldn't bear to have my friends know how I had been fooled." Her pride spoke there. Peacock feathers. She wasn't thinking of my love of her. She was thinking of what other people would say, Andy and Olga and all the rest. Pride mattered more to her than love, more than anything in the whole wide world. I tried again. "If we love each other enough," she broke in. "Oh, what does either of us know of love? If you had loved me, you wouldn't have made me risk a thing like this. We've been just two children playing with our emotions." I caught her hands up in mine, crushing them until she winced. "Speak for yourself, Mimi, but you shall not say such things of me." "You are hurting my hand, Cherry." "You are hurting my heart." I did not let her go, and presently she ceased to struggle, and I had her in my arms. "Oh, Cherry, Cherry," she whispered, after a long, tense silence. "I've been such a little beast to say such things to you." I knew then that she was mine again, that my masterfulness had conquered. But the things she had said had left a scar, and the problem which were before us had found no real solution. 2. The question of a maid became a burning one. Dora Hayes was, it seemed, to go in a day or two to a summer hotel on the other side of the mountain. I offered her equal wages, but she wanted the excitement of the change of scene and of the company she would meet. It was, in a sense, for Dora a social opportunity. There were young men employed about the hotel. Other girls in other seasons had found their mates. Mrs. Hayes was sorry that she could not cook for us, but Dora was the oldest of a family of 6, left thus by her daughter's departure to do the work for a family of 7, plus certain of the farm labourers, who were boarders. Mrs. Hayes' hands were more than full. "It wouldn't be hard work for just the 2 of you, Miss Chandler," she told Mimi, "if you knew how to do it." "But I don't know how, Miss Hayes. I've never made a biscuit, or baked a cake, or fried a chicken in my life." "Well, I could learn you," said kind Miss Hayes, beaming. It was I who protested. "We simply must have someone to help my wife." I could not see Mimi as a daily drudge, with her hands rough, her lovely face above a pan of steaming dishes. It made no difference to me that my mother had done these things. I wanted Mimi always silken and shining. On the day that Dora left us, we annexed the half-breed wife of one of the farm labourers. Her name was Sally, and she came up twice a day and did the heavy work. She could cook nothing, however, except the coarse food which her husband demanded. So I supplemented her efforts and became the family chef. It was easy enough in a way, and a relief from my writing. When Mimi protested, I laughed. It will be a great game, just the 2 of us, and with Mrs. Hayes' bread and plenty of fruit and vegetables. And I've written to Denver. They ought to get a maid to us in a week or 10 days. Perhaps before that. It will be easy enough until she comes." Mimi entered wholeheartedly into the spirit of it all. We lived picnic fashion and thought of the arrangement as temporary. Except when the weather was bad, we ate our meals on the porch, which overlooked the valley. I boiled the eggs and made the toast and coffee, and Mimi set the table, giving it a festive look with fruit and flowers. Those out-of-door feasts were a matter of great curiosity to the 5 small Hayes children. They ranged in ages from 2 to 11, and they were all as tow-headed and as freckled as Dora. The Hayes house was on the mountain above us, but faced, fortunately, the back of our domicile. Otherwise I am sure we would have eaten always with an audience gazing down upon us, spoiling our solitude and the scene. They often visited us, however, a trail of them in calico and blue denim, well-fed, rosy, and utterly bewitched by Mimi. Like Dora, they moved in a daze of admiration. Mimi found in them a never-ending source of interest and amusement. "I didn't know there were such people in the world, Jerry, and they haven't any manners. They just stare and laugh." I had seen many such children. I had been brought up among them. I had known their intelligence, their quickness of thought, their sense of humor. But to Mimi they were funny little puppets, a part of the show, as the kittens were a part of it, or the bantam roosters, or the waddling line of little ducks. She laughed at them, but never with them, and the difference is great. Their names were Jimmy Hayes and Johnny Hayes and Mary and Susie Hayes, and the oldest one was Timothy. How 12-year-old Timothy had escaped from being called Tim nobody could tell, but the long name suited him. He was, in the last analysis, a dignified little chap, and he was more than that. He was a child of great imagination and sensibility. He attached himself at once to Mimi, following her as faithfully as Jason, but leaving her without any signs of sensitiveness when she indicated that she wanted to be alone. Her capture of him had come about one day when she told the 5 children the story of the wild swans. I found them all one afternoon in a grove of pines not far from the house. The ground beneath the trees was bare of all undergrowth. There was a carpet of needles, with a few boulders shouldering through them. Mimi sat on one of the boulders. She was dressed in green and looked like a dryad. She was very dramatic in her rendering of the story, and I kept out of sight until she had finished it. From where I stood I could see Timothy. He looked up, caught my eyes on him, and a wave of color almost obscured his freckles. But in another moment he had forgotten me and was hanging on Mimi's words. But that night when Mimi and I sat on the porch in the moonlight, a lanky youth rounded the corner of the house and stood in front of us. "Miss Chandler," he said, "I came down to ask you about that girl." "What girl, Timothy?" "The one in the story that made all the shirts for her brothers. She didn't have to make them shirts, did she?" "No, she did it because she loved them, and she didn't want to see them suffer." "Well, I'll bet you Mary Hayes wouldn't sew on no shirts like that for me or Jimmy or Johnny." "She might, Timothy, if it would save you from some unhappiness." He pondered that, sitting on the step, his face turned up to the sky, transfigured by the white light into a beauty not unlike that of a painting I had seen on the Boy of Wynanda. "Well, I guess we don't any of us know what we would do till the time comes, do we? But that was some girl to sew on them shirts." He left us and we laughed a little. Yet it was Mimi who said, "He's a darling, Jerry, and he doesn't know it." Except for the Hayes family, and the farm labourers, we saw practically no one from weekend to weekend. The nearest ranches were several miles away, and 2 of them were owned by upstanding Scandinavians, practical farmers, with whom I found it easy to be neighbourly, but whose wives had absolutely nothing in common with Mimi. They talked continually of their housekeeping, their health, and of their children. Both of them were heavy, somewhat blowsy creatures, though rosy-cheeked and smiling, with families of tow-headed, freckled children not unlike the Hayes tribe. "I don't see what they get out of life," Mimi stated, as we rode home one day from brief calls at the 2 places. "Perhaps," I said, "they love their husbands and their children enough to make up for all the rest." Mimi tilted up her chin. "They are happy because they don't know any better," she said scornfully. We rode one day in the little Ford car, which was used about the farm, to the summer hotel, 20 miles away, where Dora worked. It was high up on one of the highest mountains, and was a charming, rambling structure, built absolutely in accord with the landscape. Its timbers were rough-hewn. There were great stone fireplaces, and the simple furniture was beautified and brightened by Indian rugs and pottery. "If we had a little house like this, Jerry," Mimi said, "it would be wonderful." "Perhaps we may, some day." She stood looking into the roaring fire. "It was a hearth like this of which I dreamed." We stayed for dinner and danced afterwards. The hotel had a fashionable Midwestern patronage, and I am sure that Mimi was recognized. We were much observed. "When you get your affairs settled, we can buy a good car and come often," Mimi said happily as we rode home. 3. Our honeymoon progressed in a sort of maze of haphazard housekeeping. Sally's ministrations kept us from actual chaos, and when the ugliness of golden oak and maroon brocade got too much on Mimi's nerves, she found refuge in our own rooms, which shone with the crystal and silver which she had brought, and from which she had banished everything but the walnut furniture and our own belongings. I had a desk by my window, and Mimi always kept flowers on it. I had believed that the view of the mountains and Mimi's presence would inspire me to write masterpieces, but I was doomed to disappointment. I found it indeed difficult to write anything at all. For some reason my pen lacked fire. It was as if in living so vividly I had robbed myself of the power to express that vividness on paper. Moreover, I yearned to be out of doors with Mimi, riding over our domain and beyond it, up the trails to little lakes cupped in the top of the lower peaks, with yellow lilies reflected in their depths and the slim trunks of the pale aspens. It was wonderful to be alone in all that vast loneliness, going up and up through spruce and pine to see a coyote like a grey shadow crossing our path, or a deer with startled eyes, and the lovely wild leap which took it out of our sight. It was as if our lives had 2 sides, the side of the ugly house with the hateful shadows of drudgery which hung over it, the side which had to do with ugly memories of the things Mimi had said to me on the night of our arrival and the morning after, the ugly side of my financial uncertainties, and the other side of Mimi in the orchard with cherries looped over her ears, Mimi in the sweet hay of one of the barns with a puffball of a kitten in her lap, Mimi brushing her bright hair with a silver brush, Mimi whipping the streams with her trout line and beating me at it with a skill she had learned in the Maine woods. I cooked the trout for our dinner, and we had vegetables from our own garden, and perhaps a sweet load of Miss Hayes' baking or a dish of cream cheese which she had made for us. Idyllic? Yes. And it couldn't last. There was always that haunting thought of the other side of things, and the crash came in a letter from my lawyer. There were, he said, practically no funds at my disposal. If I could make the farm pay, I might tide over the present crisis. Otherwise, he would advise me to sell. There was a letter, too, from the employment agency at Denver. They gave me little hope. They might be able to send a cook if I was willing to give very high wages. There was much objection on account of the remoteness of the ranch. The sum they named as wages took my breath away. I had never dreamed of such rewards for domestic service. I had made up my mind when we were first married I would have no secrets from Mimi. In an ideal singleness of soul, a man and his wife should bear their burdens together. But it seemed to me now that I would better let well enough alone. Why worry Mimi with things which might straighten themselves? I would give more time to the management of the ranch and less to writing. I might even get along without Hayes. He had himself suggested it. He wanted to accept an offer to take charge for the summer of the livery stable at the hotel where Dora worked. He knew all about the mountain ponies and could teach the guests to ride. He could make more money in 3 months than I could give him in a year. When I told Mimi that Hayes was going, she asked, "But who will manage the farm?" "I shall do it myself." "But when do you expect to write, Jerry? You can't be cook and manager and an author." "Why not?" "Well, it isn't fair." There was a flush on her cheeks. "I am strong. I can stand it." "I am strong too, Jerry. You must let me help." But I felt it would be an entering wedge to destroy her exquisiteness. I had a desperate feeling that something must turn up. I wrote again to my lawyer and told him to sell an acre or 2 of land. I wrote, too, to the employment agency in Denver, urging them to send a cook and stating I would pay the price. It was when I began to do Hayes' work, however, that I found what I had undertaken. The laborers on the farm lacked any sort of initiative. They were accustomed to constant supervision and could not work without it. They must follow a leader or remain inactive. This made it necessary for me to be with them almost constantly. It made necessary, indeed, actual physical effort on my part. I helped them with the hay. I helped them with the cows. I stood over them while they whitewashed chicken houses and put up wire fences, and while they taught the young calves to drink. And after such efforts I would come into the house dead tired and dirty, to find Mimi immaculate, with flowers on the table, with a great can of hot water ready for my bath, with my clothes laid out on the bed. One night when I had had an exceptionally hard day, the thought of such formality irritated me. I had had to stop in the kitchen to supervise Sally, to see that the lettuce was cold and that the little roasted ducklings were done to a turn. I had asked her questions about the sweet potatoes and the coffee. I had seen myself suddenly as a farcical figure, a plain farmer trying to measure up to a fairy princess of a wife. So I said to Mimi, who stood cool and crisp by the screen door, looking out on the mountains, "I think I shall stop dressing for dinner. It is rather out of keeping, isn't it, with the tout ensemble? People who don't dress for dinner are barbarians." "My own people didn't do it." "Do you mean that they looked like you?" There was scorn in that, and I winced. I told her the truth. "No, they didn't. My father always wore his black coat. My mother insisted on it. She was proud of him." "It is a woman's pride in her man which keeps the world civilized," my wife told me. I think I should hate you, Jerry, if you degenerated into the kind of man like those on the other ranches." Do you think I could? I demanded. Do you think that clothes count as much as that? They count a great deal, she said coolly. You'd hate me if I wore my hair in a tight knot and had a shiny nose like Sally. I fled then and dressed. We had been very near a quarrel, but I was aware when dinner was over, and Mimi and I sat on the porch, that my self-respect was much increased by the perfection of my attire. Yet I was aware, too, that there must be something the matter with both of us if externals counted so much. So I continued to labor through the day like any farmhand. At night I played the gentleman. The thing couldn't, of course, continue, and I couldn't see where it would end. I felt that I ought not let things slide, but they were sliding. I wondered how I should meet the avalanche of disaster when it came. End of chapter 10. From the novel Peacock Feathers by Temple Bailey.